so I've started the recording. That should be alright, actually. I'm going to get the bot to join to just record the audio as a backup. So,
Wow, that is pretty loud.
Now recording.
you can hear the fan in the background?
I could for a moment. It sounded kind of like a lawnmower.
Yeah, it does do that. I'll mute myself so that it doesn't affect it too much, as long as you can hear what I'm
It's okay
saying.
right now.
All good. So Beyond has managed to come in as well. Welcome, Beyond, and thanks to both of you for coming in to do this. This is it's the second AMA that we've had in this server on veganism. The first one was with Bryn. I'm sure you guys know Bryn. That's on my YouTube channel and some other channels.
So you're recording. Do you mind if I afterwards grab a copy of that?
I'm sorry, what? I didn't catch it.
Do you mind if I grab a copy of the recording afterwards? And
No, not at all.
Possibly.
That's absolutely fine.
All right, cool. Yeah, please send it to me too, because I wasn't able to figure out how to record.
Yeah, no,
which means I probably should learn.
You can.
I need to get more savvy on how to record stuff because I'm starting a YouTube channel myself, and I think it'd be useful to know how to record these things.
Yeah, absolutely. That's not a problem. I won't be uploading it tonight. I'll probably upload it tomorrow. I mean, it's 7 p.m. for me, so I'll probably have this up by midday tomorrow. You're more than welcome to capture that and re-upload it to your channels. Not an issue at all.
Oh, fantastic! Thank you.
So I guess we should probably get started. I mean, I do want to remind people that this is not like a debate, a savage back and forth or something. This is an AMA, which stands for Ask Me Anything, because it's surprising some people don't know what AMA stands for. We have Nick and Beyond here. They're both vegans. They are taking any questions that anybody wants to ask them. It's my understanding that Nick is going to be mostly taking more of the questions on ethics and morality, and Beyond will probably be handling more of the questions about health and environment and stuff. Is that fair?
Oh yeah, that sounds good.
Fair enough. So I guess we can open up. Who has a question for either of these panelists? Let's not waste their time. Let's get straight into asking them some questions. Nobody. Okay, right. We're gonna shut it down. Fuck it.
No, SD, you told me no slicing, so I am thinking of a nice question.
Yeah, it's just an AMA. You can ask them anything you want to know about veganism. Maybe you have health questions or concerns or something about ethics. Just ask away.
Anyways, I was.
If veganism is optimal for health, if it's a diet that humans should be pursuing, why is there so many vegans that have failed at the diet and are now ex-vegans?
well, first off, I mean, I don't know what you mean by optimal. I don't know if we can, how would even begin to determine what an optimal diet is for humans. It's really just what's relative to. Typically, we compare it to the standard American diet. It seems to perform better, and a lot of the ex-vegans I've seen, like recently Raw Lyman's one, she was just doing like mono meals. She was not getting enough calories, and she wouldn't take any kind of dietary advice. It was all about what she felt was the best diet, and there is some good evidence for what you should be eating or what you should be including. So if someone is really, and I hate to pull out this meme, right? But it's like she's just doing it wrong. And there are various protocols which she ignored as well that could have put her, because she had gut issues. A lot of ex-vegans, you hear that they have a lot of these stomach issues or digestion issues, which can often be solved within veganism, but I'm not aware of why someone would therefore conclude that you should go full carnivore or keto when we don't really have good evidence to support those kinds of diets. So I don't know why we would just be going to something like that as like a solution. But
Well, so if, like, let's say the layman that doesn't understand maybe all the biology or biochemistry behind it, they're just basing it off how they feel. Like a lot of these people, it's not like they started out as a fruitarian. They often started out, with something pretty mild like the starch solution by McDougall or whatever, and then they either they get results at the start, and then they start to lag, and then they search for something else, and then they're looking for a certain type of health or something, and then they progress further into maybe some questionable vegan diets, sure, but it's just like it just seems weird that if this, like, because well, you said that if, like, you don't know what an optimal diet is, but like I think we can determine what like kind of an optimal diet is for almost any animal. Like every animal has a diet that they eat that is optimal for them. So I think
well,
that's a little bit of a cop out.
I don't know about that, because in theory, right, you could have some diet from outer space that just is better for a cow, or like better than grass, right? That allows a cow to live longer. I mean, we don't even know these things. We just observe a cow eating grass and it seems to perform fairly well. So these are just ad hoc or post hoc explanations. We're just retrospectively explaining what we observe. But when you say like the optimal diet, I think of that as like some objective fact of the universe, and I think that's a really high bar to meet. All we know is when you eat this, it seems like greater proportion of people have this result. Or with that though, I do want to touch on most of the ex-vegans I've personally talked to. They weren't following something like an Esselstyn diet, which is just a comprehensive approach, lots of vegetables, legumes, whole complex grains, etc. Like a lot of the times they're scooping like 3 cups of spinach per day, and then they got kidney stones or something. Like and spinach, right? Like in lower amounts, or if you're just genetically predisposed to being able to digest it easier, a lot of the time you'll never have an issue. But if you're just out of the blue just loading smoothies, 3 cups of spinach a day, I mean, like with no kind of adjustment period, you're gonna have some kind of overload with digesting those. I mean, you have to adjust to these foods, and all the people on these meat-based diets will say, "Oh, you have to get fat adapted," but never do they consider that they would have to ramp up their fiber digestion, because you can't just go from 20 grams of fiber a day and start eating 100 grams of fiber a day and expect that your gut, your microflora is going to be adjusted to that. It has to be a transition. And I hardly ever see any of these ex-vegans telling me that that's what they've done. It just doesn't seem like they've covered their bases.
Well, I like not to take up all the time, but
Sorry, SD, you're
I,
popping off. Your mic's popping, SD.
not to
It's
take up all
not
the
me.
time, but I was just like I think that fat adaptation is much different than the digestion issues that vegans have. I think these two things are completely different, because once you're fat adapted, by and large, you're fat adapted for life. It's literally making new receptors on your cells. Um, it's programming your body to use ketones as fuel,
Right.
which is
One's
which is
gonna
which is
be like
different,
a
which is very
a
different.
gut interaction, like a large intestine colon interaction. One's not, right. I get that.
Yeah.
But like it just the thing I was pointing out there was that it just seems weird that one would be willing to take the measures to become adapted and the steps and the phasing in for something like a keto or meat-based diet, but not do the same thing ramping up to eating more fiber.
Yeah, sure. And like I would kind of agree. But I would say that a lot of people could they can switch, straight on to carnivore, and yeah, they're gonna feel like shit for a week because their body doesn't know what the fuck to do with all these ketones. But
And
after that, once they get over the hump, it's like, they could quit carnivore for 3 months, come back, and it would be gravy.
there's also another good point here that we don't really, I mean, the data that we have, the statistics about vegans leaving veganism, right? Often there's this claim made, and the statistic that's pulled from isn't really just about vegans; it's about vegetarians as well. And if you talked to vegans who have been on the diet, or have talked to some kind of dietitian, or actually have planned their diet out, you're not going to see that. I mean, the claim is 80% of vegans quit, and that's not just vegans, right? So it's a false equivalence. But when we actually, so we don't even know how many vegetarians or vegans are actually quitting, because that number is just sort of clumped together. We don't have a large enough sample size of vegans, but again, people quit diets all the time. Like, people quit keto all the time, and we don't know if there's a greater preponderance of vegans actually leaving veganism compared to any other diet group leaving that diet. So, like, it's not that this diet would be wrong. I mean, because then you'd have to make that criticism about anyone who quits any diet that they've ever done, which is oftentimes, I mean, I don't know what the dropout rate of given diets are, but it's pretty high. So I don't know if that criticism is even going to be significant relative to other diets.
I'd like to also add that veganism is a lifestyle more so than it's actually a diet. And there are different reasons to be a vegan. And if we just take the subset of vegans who do it for ethical reasons, then probably those proportion of people that actually become carnist again is probably far small.
Well, and actually, I think that point is illuminating, because it's like you failed the perfect diet. You failed the diet that is supposed to be, the best for human health. And really, I think there it kind of says it all. Like, it's more of an ideology than a
But
health
I
pursuing.
think you're embedding a claim that hasn't been really made. Like, what vegan has actually claimed that it is the objective best diet?
Well, if
I
I
mean, like,
go on YouTube right now, pretty much any vegan that talks about nutrition, they believe that it is the best diet for humans. They believe that, cholesterol is going to kill you, basically. Like if I go to like if I go to look at any McDougall video, any Gregor video, any of these vegan doctors, that is what they're saying.
well, I think the nutrition research is going to get you most of the way there. It's not going to get you 100%. So most people who have read that data will agree that a diet that is predominantly and vastly plant-based with maybe small amounts of meat, that's not veganism, but that diet, right, is going to look the same, or it's going to have similar outcomes to a diet that's completely vegan.
Yeah, well, what I'm just saying, there's a disconnect between, what Gregor says and what vegans are actually experiencing. Because like, to me, it's like, if humans were in, quote unquote, the wild, eating a vegan diet, it, like, they shouldn't be failing constantly, right? Like, if that was the diet that we were biologically programmed to eat, it's like, why are all these people failing? Why are they like stopping menstruation, or losing their hair, or rotting their teeth, or emaciating themselves? Like, look at Gregor, man. Is like like his elbows look kind of like a starving African child. Like, there's I don't know. It just seems like sure, you have all this quote unquote science that says or correlates certain things, but then you have real world people doing it and they're getting terrible results. Anyway, I'll leave with that. I won't take any more time.
Well, there is like an issue there with. I mean, you're saying that they have shitty teeth. I mean, do we know if they're brushing their teeth, or like how do we know that's caused by the diet and them not just brushing their teeth? Like, how do we know that there's not some other factor involved there, like the knowledge necessary to plan their diet properly? I mean, like, it seems like you can pull up these individual cases on YouTube, right? But if you actually go into the world, like out of YouTube land, and you actually talk to vegans, and again, all this dropout vegan data, right, isn't even applicable to just vegans. So you can't even make we can't even make these claims that so many vegans are dropping. Like maybe veganism is growing at a greater rate than there's people dropping out, and you wouldn't even be able to make that claim. I mean, it's just when you go on YouTube and you search a video, right? You're just cherry picking exactly what you're looking for there. I mean, there's a lot of vegans who have been lifelong vegans. There are vegans who've been vegan for a decade or half a decade, and they have zero issues. And it just seems like you're cherry picking with like your objections here. And
I mean, I've been a vegan for 25 years, and I've never had a problem with being underweight. In fact, quite the contrary. I'm always kind of struggling a bit with my so yeah, so like the there isn't any, I don't know of any studies that suggest that vegans are statistically more likely to be emaciated, or certainly that they are more likely to have poor oral hygiene.
That was a nice little back and forth. That's exactly what we're aiming for, just about the right amount of time. Does anyone have a question that perhaps Nick could answer more directly? I think
Yes,
he likes to
I do
focus
have
on
this question.
ethics.
Yes,
Yeah, go
since
ahead.
I would like to. This is a question for Nick. You mentioned that you have been a vegan for 25 years. Can you tell me what was the basic reason or the turning point in your life that made you vegan? Was it an ethical stance? Was it a health or nutritionist stance? Tell me your story. Tell us your story.
Yeah, it was purely an ethical stance. When so I never had any pets growing up, and I didn't really know much about animals. But then when I went to college, and actually a little bit in high school, when I started getting interested in psychology, and I ended up getting my major, or one of my majors, in psychology, the other one being in molecular biology. But when I got interested in psychology, I started studying animal behavior because I was interested in seeing how understanding how animals behave might give us kind of some guide and in sort of tapping into like our own most basic impulses and desires. I think it's very easy to become clouded and not recognize why, what we actually truly desire on a deeper level. And sometimes studying animal behavior might be a way of sort of getting some ideas into that aspect. Now, I'm not saying that animals always necessarily act completely in accordance to their deepest desires. They're pretty messed up too. But that was sort of my thinking at the time. And in studying the psychology of animals, and I started recognizing that they have these complex inner lives, I started having to face up with the idea that by eating them and supporting their killing, I was infringing upon that, and that just didn't sit well with me. There was a little period of time for several months where I rationalized eating them by saying that if I didn't, then I would be saying that I was superior to them in a way. And that sort of argument has kind of come up now and again. There was a book by Dominic Listel recently called "Eat This Book: A Carnivore's Manifesto," and he that's the argument he makes. But in truth, it isn't. You're not acting superior to someone by not being willing to kill them. And once I recognized that I was simply just rationalizing, I became vegan overnight.
Hmm. Uh, since you brought up the topic of superiority, uh, one thing has to be superior to another in at least some method to be considered superior. What do you think is the, as you're a vegan, so that would mean that you do not think, or maybe I'm wrong, but correct me if I am, that you do not think that humans are superior to animals. Uh, so you must think that we are equivalent to them. In what manner or in what medium do you think that humans are equivalent to animals, and why?
Well, I I think that the fundamental evil that's been ubiquitous from like sort of the dawn of mankind as far as recorded history is this is labeling is valuing someone based upon the vessel that their mind is in as opposed to themselves. They're as for the mind themselves, the mind in and of itself. So I tend not to talk in terms of like human or animal. I talk in terms of individuals. I think morality has to happen at the level of the individual because our conscious experience happens at the level of an individual. So if we're going to value other individuals and ourselves on an individual level, it doesn't matter, what is the whether your mind happened to manifest itself when you were, first created in the body of one race or another race, or one animal species or another animal species. All that matters is that that you are a mind. You're a mind in a vessel, and you're capable of experiencing uh, joy, and anyone who has that capacity to experience these sorts of things deserves to have that, to be protected and allowed to experience those sorts of things, irrespective of what vessel their mind happens to be in, which is totally not based upon that's completely based upon luck.
Now, you use the sentence deserves to be protected, uh, the keyword being deserves. What makes, now I'm including humans in this as well. Uh, what gives anything or anyone or any individual the right that they deserve to be protected? On what basis?
Well, I mean, deserve can be used in a lot of different ways. So perhaps a better way for you uh, to hear that term is maybe the word warrant. That if you have certain capacities that warrants that you. So there's a bit of background noise.
Yo, SD, you gotta mute, man. Yo,
SD,
yo,
what are you doing?
SD, what are you doing?
It sounds like you're building a house.
SD, are you having sex
He's certainly
with the
banging.
fucking
No,
table?
not as far as I'm aware. No, sorry, I had to step away for a second. I'm back now.
Alright.
It's like your furniture is getting freaky on its own.
What, are you guys hearing noise from me or something? You shouldn't be because. Okay.
It's like something is banging.
It's not me. I wish it was, but it's not.
No, we just heard it again.
It's
Oh,
it's still
get your
there.
push to talk. Just push to talk on.
It's not me, but right. So is that question? Has that one had enough back and forth? Because if it is, we can move on to.
Well, no, I don't think I fully I fully answered that
No,
one
you,
yet.
you go ahead then, Nick.
Okay, so yeah, so just think of it in terms of warrant. If you have certain capacities that warrants you being protected, not that you necessarily deserve it, it's just that you warrant it. Does that?
I don't understand what you define as warrant. I mean, because now I'm including humans in this as well. As I know, uh, as a human, I don't think that I deserve to be protected. Me deserving to be protected has to do with other attributes, as uh, because of my family, because of the value that I put in my family. I deserve to be protected in my family because of the value that I put into my country. Therefore, I deserve to be protected via that country. Uh, And that is the whole basis of armies and states and villages. Uh, but animals don't have that.
Right. So I think you're making, not on purpose necessarily, but you're making an equivocation between moral agency and moral patience. If you're being a moral patient merely means that you have certain capacities that warrant being protected. Because, so if you're able to experience love, then you have the right to not have somebody infringe upon your ability to pursue that. There isn't any obligation that others maybe have to give you opportunities that you did, that you just out of sheer chance uh, do not have. And certainly, there's a lot of luck involved in terms of what opportunities you will have and will not have. But it's an obligation that everyone has, every moral agent has, to protect every moral patient, anyone with the capacity to experience these things, to not get in their way. Now, as far as what you're talking about is more tied to what are the obligations owed to moral agents, and moral agents are capable of engaging. So moral agents don't necessarily have any more intrinsic value than moral patients, but I mean it's sort of it's kind of a one it's sort of a one it's a sort of one way thing. Most moral agents will be moral patients, but not all moral patients will be moral agents. I'll just add one more thing, and it has to do um, with reciprocity. When you give something to someone else, you have the right to expect that you are paid back in turn. That's a simple tit for tat or contract. So if I give you $5, then I have the right to expect that I be returned the $5 if that's what the initial agreement was. So if you have $5 and you give it out of charity to someone that didn't give you $5 instead of giving it to me, then you're morally violating me, and you're not morally violating the other individual if you choose to give me the $5 and not them the $5. So certainly, when you put into a system, you do have a right to expect something to come back to you, but it's not your right to take from someone else, even someone that's not part of your system, not part of your social contract. It's not your right to take from them and sacrifice them or use them, or promise something that belongs to someone else as part of your agreement with someone that's within your that you are contracting with. And I know that wasn't super clear, so let me just say, like, um, I can give you the promise that if you are ever in danger, I will do whatever it takes, even risking my life to save your life. But I can't promise you that I will sacrifice someone else to save your life, because it's their right to have their own life. It's not my right to take their life to give it to you. It's only my right to sacrifice myself. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. But now it brings up the question of proprietorship, because the kind of moral standards, which, by the way, if I may say so, are at least the moral standards that the saints would use. Take Buddha, for example. But the thing is, now we have a problem of proprietorship, because according to those moral standards, nothing belongs to anybody. You cannot earn anything because nothing can be uh, earned. No, there is no animal, there is not even a person that you can earn, even through feelings, because in this manner you don't have the right to anything except for your own body.
There you go. That's it. That's exactly the question I was going to ask you. The one thing that you fundamentally own is your own body.
Hmm.
And
But
that's really the only thing that we can say for certain. I mean, everything else is somewhat derived. I can claim some land and say this is my land, but why is it my land? Why isn't it, like why do I own this land simply because I happen to go there first? I mean, maybe there was some animal that was living on there, and that animal might have a claim to that land, but that animal might have, chased someone else off that land. But the one thing that we do own is the body that are the vessel that our minds are in. And so morality should really stem from that recognition of that type of that ownership.
hmm Now, there is a little bit of a problem here because since we're talking about moral patients and moral agents, plants are also living things. And I don't think that it's an arguable thing. We can say that we require to eat plants in order to live, but if we do so, then how does it change us killing the animals? I mean,
Okay,
it's basically
so
the same thing.
plants don't uh aren't able to own the vessel that they're in because because it's not a vessel if there's no mind inside the vessel. Like it's a vessel for a mind. So if you have no mind, then the plant itself is not a vessel for anything. So let me give you this. I made this question that I think is useful to think about when you bring a plant, whether plants as moral patients, and I think it's helpful to ponder these two different questions. So let me go and post these in a general chat, and you can look at this. So
Go.
here it is.
General chat. Looking. Scroll down, scroll down.
This might be a good time to just announce that if anybody isn't on the mic but they have a question that they want to ask, I'm more than happy to read it out. Just post it in either general chat or VC text. Doesn't make any difference.
Oh, and I can also read these questions out loud because they're pretty straightforward. So the
Hmm.
first question is, which is more similar to an adult pig? And on the left side, I have a picture of a cranberry, and on the right side, I have a picture of a toddler in a little pink dress. Because it's kind of the same color as the cranberry, a very cute little toddler. But the question to ponder once to ponder when you see this, is which one is more similar? I mean, what do you think? What is more similar to an adult pig, a cranberry or a toddler?
No, of course, the kid, the cow, whatever.
Okay, good.
The,
So then
the
my
thing with
second
the DNA.
All right, so my second question that I posted was, granted that pigs are more human-like than plant-like, how should we treat them? And on the left side, I have a picture of a of a pig in an animal sanctuary that's being cuddled by a human caregiver, and the caption is, "We should treat them more like humans." So like people, personizing. And then on the right side, I show a pork chop on a bed of lettuce, and I say we should treat them more like plants, objectifying. So
Mm.
plants are objects, and humans are people. So if pigs are more human-like than plant-like, as you yourself admitted, then wouldn't it make more sense to treat them more like people than like plants?
No, the thing is, now you're bringing in relativity. If you bring in relativity in any discussion, then most likely the whole discussion would fall apart. Because when you bring in relativity, then you have the responsibility of putting in a vague barrier. You can give reasons for that barrier, but uh, a barrier has to be put. It cannot be an ultimate reason. There cannot be an ultimate reason if you're putting relativity into something. Because yes, uh, uh, plants are also living, but they are not as living as humans. So then where do you draw the line? Do you
Right.
draw the
So
line at the Venus flytrap? uh, it's all going to get vague. And regarding to how to treat the pig, I personally think that if there is a pig that it was a piglet, and I bought it for, you say, my boy, and it grew with us. uh, Nobody's gonna hurt that piggy. But if
no,
there was a
I'm not suggesting that we should be moral relativists, which seems to be maybe how you're using the word relativism. I'm saying that we have to be morally consistent. And if we're going to say that A is more like B than it's like C, then the only way to be morally consistent is to morally treat A more like B than like C. So that's all I'm arguing for with these two different pictures. And I think intuitively that makes sense too. I can't imagine that you would necessarily that you would disagree with that.
uh, the thing is, you can use the same pattern to because we're doing it all relatively, you can skew the scale. At one side you can put a monkey, and on the other side you can put a pig, and then you can slaughter the pig and pet the monkey.
Why? Why? How does that follow?
We eat the cranberry, we pet the pig. Now we skew the scale. On one side we put the pig, on the other side we put a monkey. You pet the pig and you pet the monkey and you kill the pig. Then you can keep skewing it on up to cannibalism. You can keep on skewing this.
I just don't
Yeah,
know what you're saying. What are you
I don't
saying?
think.
I think everything just died out. Or did somebody
No,
say
no,
something?
we're all still here.
I just don't understand what you're even really saying. Like, you're
I,
saying
I
you
think
can
he's
you can.
alluding to the sentience hierarchy.
I think what we'll do, we'll let Beyond chip in on that. Beyond, did you have something to put forward on what was going on there?
Well, there's a lot said. I don't know where I would jump in. I mean, what Nick, where like what would your response be to like? Because I don't even know what he's saying or if it makes sense at all. Like he's saying you can kill a monkey or you can hug a monkey or like your view could just be relative to like what you value or you don't.
Sid, clear it up, man.
Yeah, the thing is, he gave the example of a plant and a pig, and asked which one of them is closer to a human. And of course, a pig is closer to a human compared to a plant. And
No,
my
that's not what I. That's not what I did. You have to reread the question. I asked which is more similar to a pig, a human, or a plant. I didn't say which is more similar to a human, a plant, or
okay, even if we go by that way,
there's a big difference.
what is more closer to um, what is more closer? Who is the human more closer to, a monkey or a pig?
See, you're doing it again. You're not cognizing the question. The individual on the table here is the pig, not the. So then the question has to be about which is more similar to a pig, a plant, or a human. And if you're going to say that a human is more similar to a pig than a plant, then it makes sense on a moral level to treat the pig more similar to a human than a plant. That's the argument that I'm making. I'm not saying what's more similar to a human, a plant, or a pig.
Okay, what's more similar to a monkey, a pig or a human?
I mean, honestly, I don't really know how to answer that question. That's very ambiguous.
No,
That's
the
not obvious.
the monkeys are are in the sapien genetical tree, and the pig is not. It's in, I think, in bovine or something. Uh,
I mean,
so
yes, I mean, monkeys certainly do have similarities to humans, but I mean, and by the way, I didn't just say humans in this question. I talked about toddlers particularly because toddlers are non-verbal humans. So so maybe a more close question is what's more similar to a monkey, a human toddler, or or a pig. In which case, and even that would still be a difficult question to answer because obviously there are similarities between monkeys and human toddlers, and there's similarities between monkeys and pigs.
exactly, that's
Right.
why
So
I
it's
was.
not really so it's an ambiguous question. It's hard to answer. Whereas the question that I'm asking here is pretty obvious to anyone who's sincerely answering this question. It's obvious, as you yourself answered, that a pig is more similar to a toddler than they are to a.
Yes, but then it all went
I
out
think
to saying.
maybe we should just park that one for now. Perhaps we can come back to it in a little bit. No problem at all there. I think Denise had a question. Denise, are you with us? You wrote a question. Do you want me to read it out for you, or are you on the mic?
Well, the question is actually really easy, and I was wondering if Nick is a dualist because it sounded like what he was saying about the mind being a vessel for the body. Um, it was really something along the lines of dualism.
I I'm still agnostic as to that question. I think there are, certainly there, a lot of our a lot of our experience is tied to to our sensorium. So I think there is a connection between the mind and the body, but at the same time, I think the idea that that we might have different body types and that our mind can be in one race or a different race or one species or different species, but we can all have a very similar type of experience, and in particular have experiences that are of intrinsic value, like the ability to feel love. I think it's helpful to think about that in terms of a mind in a vessel that isn't sentient. So the sentient experience inside of a non-sentient house that we own.
If you say that you're agnostic, then do you admit that you could basically be completely wrong?
So by agnostic, I'm saying that there are certain aspects of one philosophical worldview that make sense, and there are other aspects of the other uh, of, of dualism that makes sense. And I think that they're probably both correct in depending on how you're thinking about it. I don't think that the fact that there are some aspects of monism that makes sense is a defeater to the sort of hypotheticals that I'm posing here.
Well, in the hypothetical, let's just say transferring a human mind to a cow, if the human mind is the same as the human, or at least the brain part of it, then you cannot transfer it to a cow by any other way than a brain transplant or something like that. And so it would invalidate hypotheticals in which you do it without a brain transplant.
I mean, I think as a hypothetical, it's pretty easy to imagine a mind being transferred from one being into another. And even if you're not willing to grant that hypothetical, I can easily come up with a thought experiment that would be grounded in so let me pose this to you. So currently, our neurotechnology is developing very quickly, and it's possible to do brain scans. And those brain scans, and when you scan someone's brain using using functional imaging, you can find certain brain patterns that are tightly associated with conscious experiences, like the ability to feel love, for example, and also even perceptual experiences. If you were to take those patterns of those brain patterns from a cow, and then you were to put on another helmet that stimulated your brain in exactly the same way that the cow's brain stimulated the machine. So it records the machine, and now you're downloading, you're stimulating your brain the way the cow's brain stimulated the machine. Then you could, again, this is theoretical, but you could then experience exactly what the cow experienced. So that would be similar to a mind transference. Do you acknowledge that that's something that's possible?
I'd be agnostic about it because I don't know enough. Maybe some things are
Okay, so
um,
well,
transferable one to one because of different brain structure,
or
and you can sort of give the same input, but what happens in the brain is slightly different, and you get different output
are,
because of it.
so let me give you a real world experiment that's been conducted. So when you have a dog in a brain imager, and their human caregiver, who they're very attached to, is stroking them, a certain area of the brain lights up. And it just so happens that that area of the brain that lights up is the same area of the brain that lights up when the human themselves are in the scanner and they are stroking their dog. And when you ask them what that experience is, that's corresponding with that area of the brain that's lighting up, they will say, this is how I feel when I feel attachment or love or intimate connection with whoever I'm stroking. So if the dog's brain lights up the same way, we can infer that the dog is experiencing something very similar. And if you were to stimulate that human's brain exactly the way that dog's brain activated itself when being stroked, that person would be filled with the same sort of emotional experience that the dog was presumably feeling. I think it's reasonable to infer that. So like so that would be a scientific way of doing a mind transference. And if you could experience what a cow experienced when they were in a slaughterhouse, the fear that they were experiencing, the loss of the loss of all their personal connections they have with others who they might have spent time with that they're now never going to see. If you experience that, you probably would feel like that not only would feel negative to you, but if you actually were the cause of that, you'd probably feel pretty guilty about it. So the fact that you don't could simply mean that you've never really that you're simply turning a blind eye to it. It's not a rational process; it's a process of ignorance and of disconnection with what's actually happening.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand how it's
I did.
ignorance when you have a brain transfer, as you say, and you get the knowledge of how it feels to be a cow, but you just don't.
It
I mean,
was
do you
not a
feel
brain
bad for?
transfer. It's a feelings transfer that he's referring to. It's not basically a brain transfer. It's transferring the feelings. And this is the whole thing regarding veganism, because at least what Nick said, it's that the animals can feel. Isn't that right, Nick?
Right, they can feel. Like, do you see this picture of Rocket Raccoon?
No, I don't know any rocket
Well, I
raccoon.
posted a picture of a character
Where are you
from the
posting it?
Avengers. It's a very
Where are
popular.
where are you posting it? In VC text, VC links, general,
VC text.
uh, VC text?
Just in general.
Oh, I
Okay.
should post it in general. Okay.
No, you can post
Yeah,
whatever you want. It doesn't matter.
Oh,
yeah.
but I wanted to appear on the YouTube stream on the OBS record.
Yeah,
What are
it
you
will be.
showing?
I'm keeping track of where the questions are posted. Don't worry, it'll all be on the recording.
So, like, this picture of Rocket Raccoon, okay? I
Mm-hmm.
think it's natural to feel empathy for Rocket Raccoon when he's sad, like, and there's no reason to think that we couldn't, neurally enhance a cow to have the same sort of complex verbal ability that Rock Raccoon, where he can actually express his experiences in words the way adult humans, neurotypical adult humans can. So the idea that because he's not the same species as humans, that it would be more acceptable to kill them. Yes, I realize that rocket, that raccoons don't cry, but
Of
there's
course
nothing
I
about
do.
but there's nothing about animals that suggests they're not capable of having deep emotional experiences.
No, I do realize that animals have feelings. I had a cat. Uh, oh my god. And he was kind of a slut. But the thing, uh, I think what you are now, the kind of, let's say, ideology that you are subscribing to, I don't think there would be any kind of war or achievement when you're thinking like that. Because at the end of the day, the quality of human life gets better because of the properties, because of the things that we acquire. But the ideology that you are proposing, it dwindles down most things to be unusable because a human can't own. What would be your response to that?
Wait, I think you're embedding a lot of things into that I don't necessarily agree with.
Yeah, Beyond, maybe you could address some of what's it saying.
Well, I think the point that Nick was making wasn't just that animals can feel. It's that their feelings and their experiences are actually quite analogous to our own. So in that sense, if we care about the human experience, it just follows that analogous experiences are also going to have some kind of moral bearing or just kind of consideration, or that we should be considering them.
Hmm.
Like I don't know how what you said there, Sid, like responds to any of that. Like what are you
Because
getting at?
because the way he presented it, it sounded like just the way he said that our body is the only thing that we own. It dragged out from there. But even then, uh, because I personally think that values, even to people, not just to animals or things, values are put in things, how we perceive them. Uh, and I differentiate between pets and farm animals and meat. So I think that even though the meat that I most probably am going to eat, it did have feelings, but what does it have to do with me?
Wait, but I think you're not even answering what I said. So
Beyond,
we
maybe
know that
you want to present your question to him, because of course this is a two-way thing. It's
well, we
not
know
just
that
us
you're
against you.
drawing. Yeah. So we know that you're drawing this distinction between farm animals for meat and pets. But what we're trying to do is to get you to explore the rationale for that. And it just, if it just bottoms out in the fact that, oh, this one's a farm animal and that one's a pet, if that's just irreducible to you, I mean, first off, I don't really believe it. I don't think that it is irreducible in that case. I mean, what we're asking is for you to consider the possibility that you've overlooked and made a grave error in your conditioning, and that you should consider some of the experiences of these animals, since they are analogous to the human equivalent uh, experience, right? Like if we just had an amount of humans in these slaughterhouses, I don't think the experience of actually being stabbed is going to differ
Oh no, it will
in
not.
a great amount.
It will
Like,
not. Getting stabbed is same for everybody, and I've been stabbed. I know.
Okay, I think on that note, we'll move on to another question. I believe the next person in the queue was Lizzie. Lizzie, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, you wanted to ask a question. I think it was of Nick, if I'm not mistaken. You go right ahead.
Yeah, Nick, how do you reconcile the crop death's predicament with the sentiment of moral consistency?
Oh, crop deaths. Let's see. I'm not surprised you asked that question. Yeah. So I think that this is the probably the most challenging question that vegans can be, and it's also the one that is I think the vegans most often do not answer. I think in an adequate way. So thank you for asking it. So the problem is that it's impossible to live without doing without committing actions that will not merely cause suffering to others and innocent others, but also but even egregious suffering and violation of them to the you know basically killing them. It's like so this is a problem that vegans might, or they do face it, because they're trying to make an argument for veganism, to say that you have to become a vegan because it's the only way to live a life that doesn't morally violate others, yet they're doing something that is morally violating others. And so the only way I think to adequately address on a moral level is to make it is to make a distinction upon is to consider d- qualitative distinctions in terms of what harming others entails. So obviously, you know, s- so maybe the best way to do this is I'll walk you guys through a figure, because this can get a little bit complicated to think about conceptually. So I'm going to post something in general chat, and then I'll talk to you guys about how to look at this.
Okay.
Actually, this is going to go in VC text. So it looks like where I'm posting everything. So if you can like bring this, expand this picture because it has a lot of small text on. So there's a standard question called the Trolley Dilemma, and the closest and this picture actually represents the Trolley Dilemma pretty well on the right side of the image. So there's a trolley coming and it's going to run over 5 people, and you can divert the trolley by hitting a lever where it will go onto a sidetrack where it will strike one person. And this is a classic question to for people to think about when they're trying to weigh the difference between killing and not saving. So there's a moral there's a philosophical position called utilitarianism, which asks if it's okay to kill one individual to save a greater number of individuals, or is it okay to harm one individual to help a greater number of individuals? And the point of these sorts of trolley dilemmas is to help someone recognize that even though an inaction that leads to the death of a number of individuals could be that those deaths could be minimized if you committed an action that would lead to the death of a smaller number of individuals, say in this case one. There's still a moral problem because when you do the action, you're actually intentionally killing someone, whereas when you don't do the action, you are merely letting individuals die. So someone who would say that it's better to to kill someone in order to save a a greater number of individuals is not making a distinction between killing and not saving. And I think most people have an intuition that there is some additional moral weight involved when you actually are making an intentional decision to kill someone as opposed to letting individuals. So that
Yeah,
and I know you understand this, Lizzie. I know you
don't
understand.
don't you feel like this is a false analogy though? Because this is not a distinction between allowing to die and not and actively um, trying to prevent a death, but it's actually causing a death.
Right, exactly. So there's a variation of this dilemma where, which is explained on the left side, where you can still divert the train and kill this one person, but you're going to use that collision of that person to save people that are downstream from that. So this is called the loop trolley dilemma, and it's shown on the left side. So in this situation, when Ned diverts the trolley, he knows that the man on the sidetrack will be hit, but because there isn't anything, because there is a loop where it connects to the 5 people downstream, he also knows that he's going to be using that individual as a tool to save the 5 people downstream. So in both scenarios, he is intentionally killing one individual in order to save the 5. But on the one on the left, he's actually using the guy who's dying as a tool to save the 5 people downstream.
Right, and I think my contention would be, what difference does it make to the person who's being used or the person who's dying there?
Well, I mean, you can make the same case for the first in the scenario on the right, that what difference does it make to the 5 people versus the one person, about that they're going to be dying. The 5 people are dying or the one person's dying. It's not going to make a difference. The difference is in the individual who's doing the action. Like,
Right, but that is focusing on the agent and not the patient.
right. So ultimately, we are responsible for our own actions. We're not responsible for so there's a lot of suffering that happens in the world, and we're not. And if we task ourselves with stopping all deaths everywhere, it's an impossible task.
Right, but
So
mean,
morality is so morality is really a compromise between
Mhm.
acknowledge between the fact that everyone is sentient and deserves an opportunity to pursue their ends, and the recognition that you have responsibility for your own actions because you are an agent who can make decisions. So
Yeah, but I feel like you're not being entirely honest here, because it's the active role of the agent in causing like some bad state of affairs to occur. It's a morally relevant causal role that's occurring here.
right, but it's our obligation first and foremost. So certainly we should not hurt others in order to help. In order to help, we have an obligation not to hurt an individual in order to help other individuals, even if it's a greater number of individuals. That's certainly an obligation. But a greater obligation we have is not to use others as tools. So when we drive down, so if I want to drive to the movie theater, you know, there's a chance that I'm going to run over a child who's crossing over, who's running after a soccer ball across the street. That's there's a chance that's going to happen. And if I was a policymaker and I was and I made the, and I you know and I passed a law that made it allowable to drive to the movie theater. I guess already we have laws that allow people to drive to the movie theater, but if I were to say that it was permissible for people to drive to the movie theater, I would know that there's a certain number of children and animals that are going to be run over while people are pursuing their end to go to the movie theater. But I would not be, but that would be, but those individuals that would be dying would be not being used as tools to drive to movie theater because their existence on the streets would not be necessary in order to go to the movie theater. They're not being used as the means to get to the movie theater. So we would call those deaths to be collateral damage, and that's a distinction between actually intentionally using somebody in order to accomplish an end.
So would you say that it's morally permissible to intentionally swerve to hit the people on the street in order to get to the movie theater? Would that be permissible on your account?
Well, if you were intentionally swerving in order to hit that person, then your action of swerving to hit them would have the end of that action would be to hit those people. You would be doing that on purpose. There would have to be a reason or motivation. Maybe you were a sadist, for example.
Well,
Okay,
let's just say they're in the street, they're in my way. That's it.
well, you said swerve into them.
Right. Well, let's say they're on the sidewalk and I felt like hitting them.
Right. So in this case, you're actually you're using them as an end. Like you're okay.
But
So
like
let
that's
me
what's happening with crop deaths though. You're trying to make this seem you're trying to put this in an accidental context, and that's not the way it is.
Okay, so let me steelman your position a bit by even avoiding the situation where you're driving your tractor and you're running over animals as part of your farming. Uh, let's imagine a situation where you're actively poisoning or shooting animals in order to
Right.
protect your crop. Because in that case, you're intentionally killing these individuals. You're not merely accidentally running over them, right?
But can I just say one thing before you continue? That's what I was referring to initially. So
Oh, okay. Okay, good. So in that situation, imagine the distinction. It's okay. So there would be a distinction between shooting the animals and actually getting pleasure from killing them. In which case, their death would be instrumental to your end. Your end would be, or at least part of your end would be, because of the enjoyment you have in hunting them. So you're actually using their deaths as a means to your end of getting enjoyment, as opposed to shooting the animals in order to protect your crop line, in which case their the, your end is to grow your crop. The end is not the deaths of the animals.
well, it's just one layer of separation there, wouldn't you say? Because the pleasure is in the crops that you're eating.
That's right. But if those animals didn't exist to threat, this is similar to like a self-defense situation. Now I know that you're not going to die if you don't shoot these animals, but in terms of structure of the argument, it's similar to self, because because the if the animals did not exist to threaten your crops, then you would not, then you still would be able to raise your crops. So you're not actually
But
using them as a means to an end to raise your crops, because if they didn't exist, you could still raise your crops.
yeah, but like that definition of self-defense is not even something that we permit in the human context. It's only, employing deadly force when the victim fears their lives or serious bodily injury.
Right, but we do allow people to take other people's lives if it's for self-defense, even if they intentionally do so.
I'm sorry?
Even when someone intentionally kills somebody who's threatening them, that is not, our laws do make this permissible.
Yeah, but what I'm focusing on here is the reasonable perception of the imminent threat of attack that you're saying exists there. I don't think it.
Right, but when you shoot someone, you know you're killing them. Whereas when somebody is threatening you, there's a probability, in fact, a high probability that you're not going to die as a result.
Yeah, but you have to feel that your life is in danger, right?
Right, but being in danger is different than certitude.
Can you elaborate on that?
Well, when you shoot someone who's attacking you, you're you're obviously I mean, in protecting yourself, you acknowledge, there's you do not need to prove that there was a near 100% chance that you were going to die had you not done your act.
Well, right,
It's merely the fact that you were endangered.
right. But even beginning the analysis from like a third party perspective and not the perspective of the victim, it wouldn't be permissible.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Yeah, even if we begin the analysis from the perspective of like a third party, a purveyor, and not the victim, it wouldn't be permissible. In the case of crop dust.
Okay, let me take a step back for one moment and make it clear that I'm not saying that it's morally that that it's even morally acceptable to kill someone, even when you're killing them as collateral damage, when you're not using them as a means to an end. Murder is still murder, even if you're not exploiting someone. So the both of these Trolley dilemmas are still an act of murder, and they both are not actions that you should ever partake in. But I'm merely I'm merely differentiating the two, because I think that in our lives we have to draw distinctions between levels of immoral action, so that and there's a certain type of immoral action that is the most egregious, that we absolutely cannot permit ourselves to engage in, and that would be an action of egregious harm to another. Generally we would call that, murder is, I think, the key the key case of that, where that murder was done due to some sort of exploitative intent, using as a means to an end. We
Yeah, but I
cannot
don't see how
prevent
we're not
not
doing
doing
that.
so we
How are
cannot
we not doing that?
because that individual doesn't have to exist in order for us to get the end that we're seeking.
Yeah, but we're aware that they exist there, and we're taking the voluntary act to kill them in order to obtain an end that only benefits us.
Right, but you're not. But that individual's death is not instrumental to what you are trying to
Yeah,
achieve, which is the
but Nick,
which.
that is again focusing on the agent. It seems like a narcissistic preoccupation with your own virtues there.
I hate to be one of those moderators that interrupts a good flowing conversation and everybody goes, "Oh, why did you do that?" But I do want to make sure that everybody can get their questions in. We're just over halfway through the time allocated, so maybe we can come back to that in well, maybe 10-15 minutes. Does anybody have a
Yeah, sure.
question about the health implications of veganism? Because that would be directed to Beyond, and I do want to bring Beyond back in here to the conversation. Anybody want to ask anything about health?
Yeah, I believe Dylan does. He wants to know if the synthetic supplement versions of essential nutrients that aren't found in plants are equivalent, safe, and as effective as those found in animal foods.
Okay, I guess that would be a question for Beyond then. What do you have to say about that, Beyond? The
I mean,
nutrient.
I just ask like which ones are you
Oh,
most
good
concerned
God. Don't ask him that. Should we stick to probably the basics? It's going to be what? D, B12,
Well, like
iron.
I hope he's prepared for me to push back on
I hope
this
you do.
list if it gets pretty large. I mean, I don't know why he'd have.
I don't think he's actually on the mic, is he?
No. I mean, I think we can ignore creatine, carnosine, taurine, vitamin A, cholesterol, Q10, collagen. I think we could probably go for B12, heme.
Yeah, like, is there any? I'm not aware of any evidence that says that heme iron is actually essential.
Yeah.
I mean, non-heme iron exists, right? And you can meet your serum iron levels that way. So, is it essential? Is heme iron really essential? Because
well, he's.
it seems like if he wants to make this claim, I'm gonna.
He's
Because
actually
if he's
replying
making
in
a claim, then
general
that.
I'm sorry.
Well,
are you able to hear me? He's replying in general chat, and he's not making a very good comeback, but that wasn't expected anyway. Yes, thank you, bro. That was bullshit, hippie, retards, lol. That's not really a very good argument, Dylan. You're stupid. So, next.
Yeah, fuck him.
Well, I just want him to know, like, if you want to say that heme iron is essential, right? Like dietary heme iron, then you're saddling the burden of proof on yourself. Like,
What can I ask?
why do you want me to go out and like
He's
disprove
claiming
this?
that you didn't answer his question, but I'm certainly not
He's always
accuse you of that. I think you are answering his question, so give him a really good, detailed explanation.
so.
I mean, I just point out again that it's just if he's embedding in his question, he's loading the question that heme iron is essential.
Yeah.
I just have no reason to think that. Like, it's just a loaded question.
So what if I was to say like most supplements of B12 are cyanocobalamin? Does that work just as well as the B12 found in animal products?
Yeah, and there's plenty of evidence that you can meet your B12 needs through supplementation of methylcobalamin. Right. So, yeah, I mean, 99% of cattle.
And there's no
like the vast majority
downsides to this. There's no health risks.
No.
So like synthetic vitamin E and A are associated with negative health outcomes for smokers, for instance. But like,
yeah,
like
we
B12
know that
isn't.
Yeah, we do not. We know that certain cancers can metabolize certain vitamins, but I mean that's just going to apply to the animal based for like if you're loading up on liver, you're just subjecting yourself to similar potential issues.
There's
like if you have if you're predisposed.
Made in the chat. This comes from Dylan, right? He says that we would be dead without heme iron. What do you think about that? Your response?
I mean, I know people who were raised in a vegan household. Their mom has been vegan for decades. They've been vegan their whole life. I don't know where that claim comes from. Like, why would you believe that?
Neither do I, and I can't claim that I that I know where that claim comes from.
He doesn't understand that non-heme iron is converted by plant eaters into heme iron. He thinks you have to consume heme iron, and that you can't get enough vitamin A because you don't convert it properly, which I've pointed out to him a million times. That's not untrue. So, yeah. What do you think about the fact that most teenage girls are like 50% of teenage girls are actually iron deficient? Do you think it's a good idea to try and get more iron in a vegan diet?
Yeah, a lot of those teenage girls, they're not even vegan. So
Yes, I agree. Yes, yeah. Sorry, I should have said that. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think that you can just emphasize those foods, and if you're still not meeting your needs, I don't see why you would resort to like taking it through meat when you could just take a supplement. And I mean, I don't even know if there's evidence to suggest that vegans are predisposed, or vegan women in particular, are predisposed to greater rates of iron deficiency. Like it seems like the data we have on iron deficiency in women is mostly in omnivore women.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's predominantly the population that they study, though, isn't it? So you'd have to have like a specific vegan female study to prove this. But so, yeah, I agree. I mean, my personal theory is that a lot of these vegans who are failing are missing out. They get into the iron, into the B12, and they do the DHA, but they tend to miss out on the iron. I honestly think that's a lot of the reasons why people are failing. So,
but plant sources have lots of, like, you can get a lot of iron through a plant-based diet.
Yeah,
it's not something that's lost.
Well, would you say that the conversion rate differs in different people?
Sure.
From
but
non-heme to heme, yeah. So yeah, I think that too.
But I don't like I haven't seen a conversion rate of 0 ever. Like
yeah.
That would strike me, right? I like, if you have that evidence, Dylan, because you're going off in chat. I mean, just please provide it.
Yeah. I think that's
chat.
Oh God. I mean, Dylan, get on mic and we'll.
Yeah, I don't think he will. He never really does. So I think we'll push it on to another question. Anybody else have a question? Health or ethics? If you want to talk about ethics, Nick is your guy. If you want to talk about health, Beyond is your guy.
Bro.
Yeah, I had a question about one of the pictures that Nick posted in Voice.
Sure, go ahead, man. Ask.
So I posted this again, and you can see it in voice text. And my question is, can objects have a person in them?
This sounds a bit like your dualism question.
This is pretty much a dualism question. I'm sort of asking it to get more clarification, because my own view is non-dualistic. I'm thinking that an object like a computer can be given personhood, yeah, like if you make it an artificial intelligence or something like that. And I think essentially humans are the same. They are objects with personas. And I'm asking if you think as well that objects can have personas.
Yeah, so the short answer to your question is yes. I think that our bodies are objects, and our minds are the people inside of these objects. And you can so like, you can have someone who's brain dead, and that would be essentially an object, because the mind is not there anymore. So they're like an empty cup. It's a vessel without a mind inside.
So when we're talking about animals, for example, would you say that it's really incorrect to call them objects, or is it incorrect?
I mean, I would say that for sentient animals, and of course there are certain animals that are not sentient. In fact, there are certain humans that are not. But for sentient animals, we should call them people. But acknowledging the fact that the person is actually inside the vessel, which is So it's essentially a person inside of an object, kind of like a little man in your head that's controlling everything. Like we're like giant robots, kind of like that movie Inside Out, with the little people inside the person's mind.
Right. So if they are indeed objects, or at least part of them is an object, or if they're inside an object, then is it really wrong or incorrect to objectify?
Well, it's an object that's particularly owned by the little guy inside of them. So yes, it's wrong to objectify them because this is something that, because when you objectify something, you're saying that nobody has a claim to it, or that you have a claim. But by
So
definition, if someone has a mind, then if a body has, if a vessel has a mind inside, then that mind owns that vessel.
all right, thank you. So basically, what I was trying to get to say was that it's wrong to objectify objects, and you pretty much said that, unless you want to clarify any further, or just leave it that.
No, it's fine to objectify. Well, I mean, objects are already objects. You don't need to objectify them. They already are. They already are. But yes, it's wrong to objectify something that wasn't an object. That's seeing the world in a way that it isn't, that it actually isn't, because you can't, because you have to see the world the way the world actually is that someone's body is not an object. So yes, so if you've objectified that person, then yes, you're doing something. I think it might be helpful for me to kind of take a step back for a moment and explain the foundation of this moral system I'm expressing is a variant of intuition. The idea is that we can use our intuitions to tap into moral truth, and in fact, our intuitions inform our moral truths. The problem is that not everyone's intuitions are reflective of actual. So the goal of moral reasoning, or at least what my goal when I try to help people think about moral issues, is to help them tap into is to help them check their intuitions to make sure those intuitions are based upon things that actually. So to illustrate that,
Things that actually what? I'm sorry, I didn't catch what you said. Things that actually.
This was not the stereogram that I wanted to post, but I guess it will. So I posted a stereogram on here. These auto stereograms. They look like blurs of dots, but if you look at them in a certain way, an image emerges from these, from this blur of from this. Now, not everyone can see this pattern, and I think it's the goal of of someone like. It's my goal is to help someone see the pattern in a complex situation, a complex causal situation where your action might, is going to have some sort of impact on some other sentient being or group of sentient beings. We're not necessarily these moral dilemmas are complex stimuli, and it's easy to miss certain features of these stimuli. And the point of these of thinking about all these different variations of trolley dilemma is to help us parse out all this complexity to be able to see the actual what's actually happening, and then when we actually perceive it for the way it actually is, that will trigger it'll make sure that our moral intuitions that we have about that situation are in keeping with the actual reality of the stimulus.
Yeah, I mean, speaking like personally, I certainly know what you mean with the stereograms. I think that's what they're called, is it? I have a really hard time seeing those, but yes, I get your overall point, certainly.
Well, that's the point, actually. It's the fact that it can be very difficult to actually see the object that's embedded inside of the stereogram. And the stereogram that I usually post actually has a scorpion inside. I actually don't know what this one is. Hopefully it's not something embarrassing. But But the
yeah, imagine if it
yeah,
was. Ooh.
yeah, I have no idea what this one is. But the one I use has a scorpion embedded, and you have to look at it for like 5, 10, 20 minutes sometimes to actually be able to see the scorpion. And when you see the scorpion, if you happen to be an arachnophobe, you're going to get a kind of a chill go up your spine because because you have this knee-jerk response to spiders and other arachnids. And the and I what I pose is that moral situations are very similar. You might see a steak and at a supermarket, but you're not actually seeing the cow in the slaughterhouse. Or you might actually see the cow in the slaughterhouse, but you're not actually seeing inside the cow's mind. And you might actually see the cow's mind, but you might not be conceptualizing your causal responsibility in what that cow's experience or experiencing, or the lost future of this cow, to have the positive experiences, like being able to experience love when they're with other cows that they're bonded to, or with other humans that they're bonded to. So there are a lot of layers of complexity that are missed simply by looking at something quickly, or even looking at it for a long time. So it takes someone to kind of guide you through the process so you can actually perceive the reality of the stimulus. And when you perceive that reality, that will trigger an intuition that's more in keeping with what actually with what you actually deep down care about. And I think most deep down, the thing we most fundamentally care about is to live a life that does not involve the egregious exploitation of others. And only in living such a life do we feel, and there's another intuitive thing, that we deserve to experience pleasure ourselves. Only when we do not deny others their chance to experience pleasure.
I
Sorry, I know
fully
that was a
appreciate.
lot.
No, no,
Yes.
that's fine. That's not a problem at all. That's a nice statement. I do want to make sure that other people, should they have any questions, I mean, we don't have any queued up right now. Does anybody have a question for Nick or Beyond?
What's
Anything to do
the
with
question?
veganism? Anything? Go ahead.
I think Prince Polka had a question.
Yeah, he's more than welcome to present it, but that's Dylan, so I kind of doubt it. Anyone for Nick or for Beyond? Beyond is doing environment and health and things like that, and Nick is taking ethics questions. Go right ahead. You can resume something that was going on earlier if you want to. Just go ahead.
I would actually like to ask beyond the environment question.
Sure, go for it.
Hit it.
I'm just agnostic on the case of environment. I don't know anything. So could you inform me why veganism would help the environment?
Yeah, animal farming and a lot of monocropping associated with it, but also for plant-based diets as well. I mean, currently the state of agriculture is an absolute disaster, and we should be a little bit more conscious of our consumer choices, because they seem to not just applicable to carnist or to vegan diets, but also across the board are just wreaking havoc on the environment. And with the most generous and and uh, the most generous interpretations of the data, our current projections are that we don't even have much longer with these ecosystems that as we currently know them. So shifting to a vegan diet is a really good way to step back from conventional agriculture. And a lot of meat eaters often say, well, maybe I should get my meat like grass-fed beef, or which doesn't I'm not convinced that that's better in any metric. It might allow the cows to have a nicer life, but I think from what I've read, it uses more land and it also releases more methane. So and there are a lot more inputs into that, and a lot of the farming for grass-fed also requires a lot of inputs, at least in places away from the equator, because you got to supplement grass for like half the year, and that's technically monocropped, which is what we should be trying to steer away from. And with these pastures, which a lot of them have been converted in grass-fed beef, these pastures have been converted from forest. I mean, the land wants to be a forest, but if we keep it in pasture form with just grass, we're not going to maximize carbon sequestration, and we only have less than 60 years of topsoil left. And again, that's just generous. So we might have like far less in certain areas, just due to nutrient runoff, monocropping. It's decimating the top layer of the soil, and a lot of carnists and vegans, more people are becoming conscious of this, but the solutions are still on the table, and a lot of people aren't agreeing about what the best solution is. And permaculture is one. Permaculture is a great one. We could have regenerative plant farming, and we could have food forests, and I think that would be a great way, because forests are the most productive form of land. They're going to bring the nutrients from the deepest parts of the soil, and no kind of grass is going to be able to reach these deep parts where these mineral deposits are. And it takes such a long time to create soil, millions of years of fungi just decomposing a rock to turn it into soil. So we should be valuing these minerals, these nutrients, and we're currently not. We just take from the land, and then we ship that produce somewhere across the world, and those nutrients never return. And there's more of a holistic or permaculture or polyculture or agroecological approach, which there are a plethora of methods, and a lot of the times these methods can be employed even in the most rural areas. So it's not just a first world issue. We should be applying this across the board, and we could be helping actually fix world hunger through these ways, because I think that's an important issue as well. But in terms of why actually go vegan, well, I mean, it uses less land, and I hate to use this word, right, but we're kind of raping the land of everything, and we're the only species who can actually choose which trophic level we want to be, and from where we want to eat. We could eat as a secondary consumer, right, or a primary consumer, or sorry, like we could either be eating plants, or we could be eating at the top of the quote unquote food chain, which I don't even know if that's going to be logical if we really think about it. So not to go on for too long, but there are many ways to meet our nutrient requirements, and even like not just survive, but we could like be thriving on these diets. And I think it's an important question for other vegans to ask themselves too. Like, should we be just supporting monocropping as well, or should we, if we're prepared to boycott certain industries, why are we drawing the line at just animal agriculture? Because we could be drawing the line at some kind of sustainable agriculture. And even though the vegan diet may be deemed to be more sustainable than at least conventional beef, conventional animal agriculture, I don't think that exempts you to say that your diet is actually sustainable, because I don't think that the majority of current agriculture as it stands is actually what we could call sustainable. I hope that's answers your question, Balkan.
Yeah. I do have another question on environment. What do you think of the topsoil erosion that was claimed to be on veganism's fault versus cow grass fed. I guess their manure, bringing life back to the soil.
I don't even know if they're achieving that. I mean, I haven't even really seen any data on the carbon cycle, like a full analysis of grass-fed beef. I mean, what I've seen is, and again, like to my earlier point, which was if we're going to have this pasture, we're actually we're halting the land from doing what it wants to do. If we're allowing a cow to just eat every green thing in that plot of land, or we could rotate them, but again, we could also be turning that away from pasture and more into a forest. And monocropping is just across the board horrible. A lot of the grain that we feed, over half, is fed to animals, and even more soy is turned into soy meal, which is fed to even more animals. So the majority of monocropping is going to be for the animal agriculture industry, but a lot of it too is turned into like cereals and stuff. But more and more people are realizing that those foods aren't really healthy. The processed, refined grains are not not really good for health. So I think we should be steering away from those kinds of systems, regardless if we're vegan or non-vegan.
I want to ask at this point, how much time do you guys have left individually?
Oh, I'm sorry, you cut off at the end there.
I'm sorry, I was just asking how much time do you guys have left?
Oh, I mean, I've blocked out most of the afternoon, so I mean, I can go as long as you guys want.
I'm
Fair
good
play.
for another like half an hour, 45 minutes.
That's fine. I've got about the same amount of time as Beyond as it happens. I want to thank you guys once again for like coming over here to do this. I genuinely do appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun and interesting too. So I mean, let's. Does anybody want to pick up an argument? Well, maybe not an argument, but a point that they didn't feel was quite resolved. Anybody just chip in, just ask these guys a question. Once again, it's Nick taking ethics questions and Beyond generally taking health and environment questions.
So, Nick, I was wondering if you're a feminist vegan.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're wondering if I'm a feminist vegan?
Yes, that's right.
No, I identify as conservative.
Did you know that some of the things that you said, for example, the objectifying matter, actually is a feminist subject, and they sort of tied it to veganism, and some vegans are unknowingly using feminist arguments like the one you made.
I was about to ask myself, what exactly is a feminist vegan? But,
Yeah, so before he like signs off on this conceptualization of feminism, I mean, what do you mean by that? Because it's a very loaded.
So I would like explain on the objectifying part. In feminism, there is this issue where they think that men are objectifying women as objects instead of persons. So they just look at women as some sort of sex dolls or something like that instead of another human who feels and thinks and so on. And this is brought into veganism as well, where a lot of people are looking at animals and objectifying them as something to eat, a piece of meat, without considering that these animals have feelings, they have the thoughts, and so on. So it's almost like analogous, and they are breaching the gap there with how we view feminism and how we view veganism, and saying that it's basically the same thing, right? That we're dealing with.
Yeah, so there certainly is a connection in any cause that advocates for justice. There's going to be certain arguments that the issue is whether the group that's being suggested as a victim is actually a victim or not. And I think that, and there's certain features of being part of a victim population, one of which is being helpless, and being so I think that certainly in the past there were uh, like let's say if we look at like slavery, like human slavery back before the Civil War. Certainly the structure of an argument for animal rights would be very similar to the structure for abolition. Um, but but a lot often these arguments are appropriated and applied to situations where they don't really fit. The reason why I'm a conservative is because I feel like very often these arguments about injustice do not act are misapplied to populations that would be better served if they were not conceptualized as victims, but actually were empowered and encouraged to sort of um, to just take the fluidity and freedom that society gives them to make the most of it and uh, and I think that they're not served very well by being conceptualized as victims. But when it comes to non-human animals, they are they are clearly victims. They're not they have no opportunity to free themselves or to pursue their ends. To the and so it's up to us to recognize them as such and to protect them and not to dilute it by tying a cause on behalf of true victims with political movements that are more uh, about power dynamics between different groups. I know does that sort of answer your question? Not every most vegans may not agree. Maybe a lot of vegans wouldn't agree with me about some of my conservative positions. I'm sure there are a lot of vegans in here that don't agree with this, so don't take this to mean that every vegan feels the way I do about this. I'm probably in the minority about some of these views.
Yeah, I guess sort of. I was also wondering if you think that veganism has been infiltrated by feminism.
Well, I mean, so far veganism is is still more or ethical, ethics-based veganism is probably not been. It's still such a minority view that it's hard to really say that it's really been infiltrated by these other causes, but certainly I have seen it appropriated before. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go man, shoot.
Nick, what do you think about the John Venus situation with the eggs? So he ate a 12-pack of eggs to clear his mind of any doubts he had about his, I think it's his daughter or his son, not getting full nutrition, and like these carnivores are in his head telling him he's going to be like deficient and shit. So he ate 12 eggs and then stopped. We're back to veganism. So he's going to be a lifelong vegan, right? And he did that to sort of like maybe steady himself or just like get rid of some doubts. Is it okay to do that if it makes you sort of like the utility at the end of it? It's like a net utility. Do you know what I mean by that?
Right. No, I understand what you're saying. I think that some of these things are complicated by the platform. I mean, the fact that so him doing it is one thing, and I would and I think that eating eggs one time, nobody sees you doing it
Hmm.
because of some sort of, you're not actually buying. I think there is a distinction between, um, you know, a moment of just sort of of like kind of an irrational moment where you're buying not even the flesh of an animal, but an egg, which might, it's like that sort of action in of itself, I wouldn't consider it sort of an egregious act, in the
Hmm.
same way that I would, you know, slaughtering an animal, for example. It's still not a
Right.
moral act, and I think it's something you were to do on a regular basis. You could certainly, I would certainly call that egregious. But then when you you post online and try to defend it, with with all of your followers, and then you make
Yeah.
an equation between that single act of weakness and a systemic generalized pattern of behavior, that it, it sends the message that veganism is something that is sort of based upon your own personal choice, and so I think that there is so I think that what he did, what he ended up doing was, started getting into the egregious territory, but in terms of like that single act of buying, of consuming an egg one time, I wouldn't call that, an egregious act.
Yeah. I think I agree. So like
Um,
if it's solidified in his own mind that vegan is the right course of action, so like he got constipated, I believe, and he's like, this is shit. This isn't um, everything I've been told by these carnivores. I think Drew Morgan was in his head, chatting to him. He's a good friend of his, and I think he convinced him to try it. He tried it, and then he can carry on with his path now. And I think what I think the mistake he made was admitting it. He should just kept that shit to himself and moved on.
well, he certainly compounded it by his actions afterward, I would say. I mean, look, in the debate between him and Richard, I definitely felt that, that Richard was more on. I tend to align more with what Richard was saying than what John Venus was saying. If that
Mm.
if that
Yeah, I
but
don't think
what are you saying?
because I don't think he helped himself by trying to debate Richard. No, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, there are, certainly humans are not, I mean, it's hard, it's impossible to live like a complete perfect life, I've, but I think that, but I think rationalizing your actions is, I think, is it can become very problematic.
hmm
I think what sets veganism apart for me is that is that in order to consume like is that in order to say that it's morally acceptable to participate in buying animal products, you are you are saying that it's morally acceptable to engage in a form of institutionalized bigotry that leads to, massive suffering and death on par with any sort of egregious atrocity, that, or I guess that's sort of redundancy, that has existed throughout human, history, and to align yourself with that, with that, with that most base, you know that most base tendency of humans to, that is the, like, the word, I mean, if you can kind of imagine what is the worst thing that a human can do, it's to align themselves with atrocious institutionalized actions like that, particularly those involving uh, the not only the disenfranchisement of outgroups and the lack of acknowledgement of outgroups, but the actual exploitation of the outgroups to the point of mass incarceration and death and
hmm
denial of all their interests. And that's what you're supporting when you buy an animal product, even once. So that's the reason why I'm not a reducitarian, because even a single action of doing that is an acknowledgement that somehow that worst aspect of human nature, the one thing that we can identify as a human evil, is something that you're willing to participate in and say that it's okay.
yeah, yeah. It's one step along the ladder of normalization. Yeah, I totally agree with that.
Yeah. All right. Cool.
Cool answer. Cool answer. I have objections to that, but I'm trying my best to bite my tongue this evening.
Yeah.
Because I'm
I think
hosting.
we're both.
I'm not debating, right? I'm hosting.
Well, we're both utilitarians, so but yeah.
I happen to be, yes. Now then, does anybody else? I don't want to wear these guys out and take too much advantage of the time that they've already generously given us in this server. Does anybody else have any questions relating to veganism, like health, nutrition? Because that would be something for Beyond to answer, or anything else to do with ethics. If you do, speak right up. You can unmute yourself and go ahead.
Can you address the date diet?
I had a theory that like Kant was autistic because he would go for a walk the same time every day, like, and his sort of ethics do seem like an autistic thing with that whole murder at the door. You should tell the truth instead of lie to him. Like that does seem something an autist would do, right?
It seems to me like it's problematic, but I'll allow Beyond and Nick to answer that. Go right ahead, guys.
Yeah. I think that when you're trying to decide upon the moral system that you want to adopt, I think it's a mistake to try to sort of pick sort of one aspect of one system that seems like a one like that seems egregious and say, okay, I'm gonna. I think you have to like kind of construct it on your own with the guidance of these other systems. I certainly, so when I say I'm a deontologist, I'm not saying that I'm just going to blindly follow one certain deontological system. I certainly think it's okay to lie to someone who's going to shoot someone that I'm so for me the question is simply whether the action I'm doing is going to cause the exploitation of another being who has capacities to experience the same sort of states of being that give my own life meaning. And if my action is going to involve that other individual's death, and particularly if it's going to involve their exploitation, I'm not going to do it. So yeah, so of course I would lie to someone to protect, to stop them from murdering somebody else.
Okay. Anything else? Anyone else?
Yeah, can I ask a clarifier? Is this threshold deontology?
So I don't consider myself a threshold deontologist. I think that if I were to, I think that even threshold deontology, threshold deontology, as I so far heard it discussed, has a lot of nuances that are not often addressed. For example, is there, there might be one threshold involving, killing someone in order to save someone, save some greater number of individuals, but that threshold would be probably would probably be changed if you were actually exploiting that individual and killing them in order to save the other group of individuals, like in the Trolley Dilemmas that I showed.
So, can you explain to me the?
Could I just offer my
Oh
perspective?
yes, go ahead.
So as a carnivore, as a non-vegan, for me, as someone who's not around like farm animals like that, and I'm not able to appreciate them or whatever, I feel like for me, the best way for me to respect animals, that are the animals that are being killed or to like feed us or whatever, the best way for me to respect them is to get nourished by them and like have their nutrients nourish me. That's the best way that I can respect them and their life that they live.
So, as a rule of thumb, I think it's important to always use yourself as the barometer regarding how to treat someone else. This is, best described as the gold. But I prefer to talk about the silver rule, which is, so the golden rule is treat others as you want to be treated.
Right.
The silver rule is do not treat others as you would not want to be treated. I think morality is mostly focused upon the prohibition of certain actions, not doing altruistic actions, which I think should be always considered to be a choice. You should not so you should not ever be forced to do an altruistic action. You should be simply prevented from doing an exploitative action or harmful action. And I think that the best barometer we can use is to say, okay, if I was in that individual situation, would I be happy if someone treated me that way? And then you should also do a similar thought experiment, which would be, if the person that I love most in the world were in that situation, would I find it morally acceptable for them to be treated that way? And if the answer to those questions is no, then it's not. Then one is not being ingenuous by saying that it's okay to treat a cow this way. And I think that's have you done that thought experiment?
I guess I have, but it's just, I guess the difference between your perspective and my perspective is that I just don't see I don't put animals on an equal perspective as human. Like,
So
Can I
now
respond
you're
to this?
equal level.
Can I?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Well, I don't know if we can put them on an equal level. Like, I don't even know if they're comparable, but I just think
Because
that
I think the
whatever
gold
they
and silver
are,
rule to me only applies to fellow humans. I wouldn't apply it to animals.
yeah, and we can go on and ask you, well, like why is that, or what accounts for that? But I think like with what you're saying, right? It's not too disagreeable. If you have an animal conceptually, it's already dead. It's just decaying, and
Yeah, I'm not involved in the process of it being exploited or whatever, being killed.
well, I mean, I think paying for it, right, is sufficient involvement to implicate you. But if you just have an animal that's just dead, like let's just say it's roadkill. I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a problem with
Oh
eating
yeah,
it.
I am aware
I don't
that
think we
some
disagree.
vegans would eat roadkill.
I mean, I wouldn't eat it, but I'm not saying I have a problem with you eating it. But I think though that you are actually implicated in the death of the animal. Like, do you not think you have a role in actually causing the death that you're?
Yes, but I also, from my perspective, like, I'm coming from a different perspective where I think meat is vital to human health, but
Why don't you unpack that a little? Why don't you explain to us why you think that? Like, why is meat vital?
well, there's
to
a lot
human
of
health?
nutrients that are only found in animal foods, or you can only get in adequate amounts in animal food. Or the animal versions are much more suited for our human physiology.
What do you mean by suited, and then how do you determine that?
Well, I mean, just for an example that's used a lot, vitamin A, the plant form is not really... Okay, so the plant form beta-carotene is converted to the animal form retinol in an efficiency of 1 to 24 to 1 to 12.
Yeah, but it's not needed in greater quantities. I mean, like if you're eating a plant-centric diet, you're saturated in beta carotene. So, and which is an antioxidant. It's actually beneficial just to have beta carotene in your body. It's just gonna
That's a
assist.
very
It's gonna help.
complex topic. There isn't a huge body of evidence to say that plant antioxidants are utilized in the body the same way that animal antioxidants like glutathione are utilized.
I think. Well, I mean, I wouldn't even make any claims either or for that.
But
I
I
mean,
honestly am not. I don't really. It's such a complex topic.
well, like it seems like you're getting just into like the weeds with just speculation now. I mean, you made a claim about the vitamin A, and I just responded by saying, since it doesn't seem like vegans are actually yet deficient in the outcome evidence, I don't know how you're going to arrive at your own conclusion that you need the preformed version.
Well, one of
And
the biggest
I mean,
things would be the omega-3 fatty acids, DHA and
well,
GPA.
let's just stay. We can go to omega-3, right? But I don't want to Gesh Gallop from vitamin A to omega-3. So with the vitamin A thing, you said it was 1 to 24 to 1 to 12 conversion.
Yeah.
So what the challenge would be is to actually show that we need more than that, or that vegans can't actually get enough actually converted through their diet. So it would have to be some unreasonable amount of carrots that you'd have to eat to meet your beta carotene or your vitamin A requirements. That would be your challenge, because otherwise, right? Like what I'm saying just still stands. I mean, beta carotene is an antioxidant. It's beneficial in the body. You're not going to lead yourself into any kind of vitamin A toxemia. So the conversion process is tightly regulated in the body, and it seems like the body wants it to be that way. And if it were different, that might be dangerous. So do you have any evidence to show that other vegans are deficient in vitamin A, like their serum levels, or
I don't. I'm
that
aware
you
of
have to eat?
epidemiological studies of vegans. But it just
But you have to agree, like if there's no vegans who are actually deficient, or there's no greater preponderance of vegans compared to omnivores that are deficient, then I mean the claim is it just dies there.
I mean, yeah, it's so hard to say, because omnivores don't really get sufficient vitamin A as well. I only have anecdotal evidence to contribute to this discussion. Like noticing noticing huge benefits after consuming liver, which is essentially megadosing my body with vitamin A. But that's just anecdotal evidence, and I don't expect you to.
No. I mean, there's a phenomenon associated with that, and I wouldn't reject that eating a large amount of preformed nutrients is going to cause your body to have like almost like a bloodthirst effect of just rapidly absorbing these nutrients. Like if you injected your body with some athletes do this, where they'll draw their blood before a race, and then on race day or before race day they'll inject their body with their own blood, and it gives them this energy boost. So what you're saying, but we don't even know if that's safe to really do. The body seems to tightly control these nutrients
Well,
anyway.
I don't think you can compare eating liver to I forget what the word is for that, but whatever those athletes do. I don't think that's really comparable, seeing as humans have been consuming liver for their entire history.
Well, you do get a similar boost though, and I mean it seems like just from comparing anecdotes side by side that the effects are relatively similar. And I'm not denying that. I'm just granting that. But what I'm questioning is whether that's
you think
actually
that could potentially cause imbalances.
It could cause things like oxidation, right? I mean, these nutrients aren't in they are in their oxidative forms, so the process of absorbing them is risky, especially if you're not eating them with any kind of plant antioxidants.
Well,
I'm just questioning whether it is. Like I'm not saying it's unsafe. I'm just questioning whether it is safe.
Okay, well, if you're bringing up antioxidants like that, I see where you're coming from. However, I'm just going to say that most of the studies that study plant antioxidants, they take the isolated compound that they're trying to look at, and they basically put it in a petri dish with human cells. And obviously that's going to have an antioxidant effect on those cells, but we don't know what those compounds are actually going to do in the context of food, and when you eat them and digest them, and when they go into your bloodstream. Like, we just cannot be sure. I don't think it's conclusive to just put it in a petri dish with some human cell cultures and then say, oh, it has an antioxidant effect, it's good for the body. Now, there are
Well,
actually
no,
the
that's a
main
good
antioxidant in the
point.
body
Yeah, but I
is
think we do have in
glutathione.
vivo. I think we do have in vivo studies on inflammation markers after eating. Like it's good to actually have experiments that's done on real humans. I agree, but I think we have those. And I guess to the point you were making was about vitamin A and whether that ratio is going to be sufficient. And
I
beta
think
carotene is
it would be sufficient to stave off deficiency. I'm gonna say that, but I don't think it would be optimal, and I know there's no way for me to prove that. But
well, I mean, because you're going off kind of like what I just call this like the bloodthirst effect. But I mean, like the race, like injecting yourself with your own blood before a race, like you're gonna have a similar like boost. I mean, that's kind of the point that I was trying to make is I grant that you can have that effect. I don't know how safe it is, and it seems like given that
well,
when
it's
when our
different
bodies
because
are
here's
converting these like the ratios that our bodies are converting these actually fluctuate. So if you have lower cell concentrations of vitamin A, your body's going to upregulate the enzyme and the genes to actually convert more beta carotene. But beta carotene is really because we don't even know how much we truly do need to eat, and that's still open for debate. But it seems like
well,
it's
if you
just really
consume
a marker
adequate
of how
amounts
many
of
vegetables
retinol,
you're
you
eating.
wouldn't need to consume beta carotene in the first.
Sure, I mean, but like I don't know why we would even do that. Like it seems like so beta carotene is really just a marker for how many vegetables you're eating, but we don't know how much of it you what some objective recommendation would really be for your daily intake. And
Yeah. I just like to answer one suggestion. Is I know that you're like so you have this intuition, or maybe you think that eating or you think that the evidence might support that eating non-vegan is, and Beyond's giving you arguments for why veganism is healthier. And I think your goal should not be to be convinced by Beyond that it's healthier or to maintain your own position. It's to remove the bias associated with feeling like that that veganism is either healthy or unhealthy, or that carnism is either healthy or unhealthy. Because only when you neutralize your bias and kind of see it as being not positive or negative can you think about the moral issue with clarity. The moral issue will be hard to think about whenever you have bias in either direction. Even if you think that veganism is healthier, that actually might effectively bias you into in a way that that would allow you to convince yourself that it's too good to be true, that it's also the more ethical action. The reason why judges will recuse themselves from cases when they identify they have a bias in favor of, let's say, the plaintiff over, is because it's not so that they won't, it's not to stop themselves from ruling in favor of their relative, but to protect themselves from even ruling against their relative out of a desire to be fair. The moment you have
You
a
know what? You're
bias.
right. You're right. This is a debate about vegan morals.
Well, no, it's both.
And
But,
I was
but what I'm saying is that you're going to have a hard time thinking about the moral issue if you have a bias in either direction. I think the goal should be to eliminate that bias so that you can think about the morality question with clarity.
I agree with that completely.
yeah, I
For
agree.
me, if it turned out that vegan diet were deficient in some way, which I mean, that case hasn't been made to be clear, but if it were, or if I were going to die tomorrow, right? In principle, I would still have the ethics that I have. I mean, my veganism doesn't pivot on something like health, so I think more vegans should be just arguing, not that it's the objective optimal be all end all diet, but just that it seems like it's good enough. That seems like the majority of vegans who are actually informed on the issue or of how to eat are doing just fine. Some of them are thriving. I'm not saying all of them are thriving, but I think that the ethical question and the ecological question are really more important, but a lot of people don't
Than
really
the
have
health
these
aspect.
altruistic. Yeah, like a lot of people just have the egotistical aspect. Like there are people
Yeah,
who
I
would.
mean, I guess you would call me egotistic because I think the diet is like the foundation of the rest of your life, and if your diet isn't strong and not providing you with everything you need, you're not going to be able to succeed in every aspect of your life.
But like if we destroy the planet with a given diet, and I'm not saying any diet is doing that, but that would be something that would be a good to question if a vegan diet were like destroying the planet, or if a carnivore diet were destroying the planet. I mean, it doesn't really matter what your health is if it's going to cause the collapse of everything that we know currently.
And I think also you have to, earlier on, you were talking about humans and animals as being some sort of block. And I think that you have to train
I'm aware
yourself.
that humans are animals. I'm aware of
Well, it's not
like
so much about that's also another block. That's another category. I mean, ultimately, you are your experience, and someone else is their experience. It isn't, someone else's value doesn't derive from what group they happen to be a part of. So it's not the right question to ask whether animals deserve rights, or that whether animals are superior or inferior or equal to humans. The issue is whether the actions you do impact somebody else, and what your obligations are to somebody else that has the same capacities for experiencing the things that you yourself value. And if they do, then you have a right to not
do they
infringe
have the
upon
same
their.
capacities of experiencing the things that I value?
Well, some of them
I
do,
don't
some
see
of them
it that
don't.
way.
Again, we'll say again, you're using they again. It's other individuals. Like, so, do the individuals that you impact each have a capacity to experience the same sort of states that you yourself value? I think it's very hard to argue. I can't imagine you would argue that the standard pig that you're buying when you buy a pork chop would not have the capacity to experience a state like love. And if you take away that animal's ability to experience that, then you're saying that the experience of love itself doesn't have any value. And what is your life if you subtract the ability to love? Can you imagine
Well, I'm
what
not
would
sure
life be
that their
about if you could?
experience of love is equivalent to my experience of love.
When you see a so okay,
Uh,
so what about the experience of a child hugging their parent? Can that child experience love?
yeah, absolutely.
Right. Do you think that a pig is less capable of experience the same sort of state that a 2 or 3-year-old child can experience when they're hugging their parent?
Um, are yes, but
Okay.
like a child's experience of love is not going to be equivalent to a grown person's experience of love.
Well, whether that's true or not, or whether that, I mean, maybe they won't have the complete repertoire of conscious states that a human would have. They might have others with more intensity that actually in of them that might actually even have more value. Who's to say? But we do know that they have an incredibly high level of value, and to take the life of someone who has that ability to have that experience, you're de facto saying. Through your actions, that experience doesn't have value. And if you're saying that experience doesn't have value, then you don't really have, and you're willing to take that from someone else, then that means that you're not going to feel you have the right to take that for yourself. And if you subtract from your from the things that that you allow yourselves to take, the ability to have the sort of experience that a pig or a 3-year-old child has in hugging their mom, then I mean, what would your life be about then? What could you possibly value? Subtract that out. Does that make sense? Like, if you take someone else's ability to experience that, then you're saying that thing doesn't have value, right?
Well, I was saying that the best way for me to respect their to give that thing value is to get the nourishment.
Right, but you wouldn't be. But would you accept it if somebody apply that to someone you love, that it'd be okay to take their life because their flesh has certain nutrients? Is that really a respectful way to treat somebody? Would you
Why would
find
we
that
do
morally
that to someone I
acceptable?
love when an easier alternative would be an
Well, I mean,
animal whose capacity for intelligence is great?
I don't know if it's easier or harder, but throughout history, people have found reasons to take others, using their greater power, uh, and their ability to rationalize to be
Well,
to take those to take.
say like you were on a shipwreck and you're like lost out at sea with like five other people, and it's getting at that point where like people are like, I would say in that situation cannibalism would be justified.
Right. So you have to make a distinction between. So if I just because I might be willing to save my life over yours, does not mean, or the life of a loved one over yours, doesn't make it morally acceptable to kill you in order to save my life or the life of a loved one. There's a difference between choosing to save one or the other if both are in danger, like in a burning building, where an inaction will involve both dying, versus actually killing one individual to save the other. You have to be careful not to equivocate between those two different scenarios. One is a burning building
It's
scenario.
like
The other
one,
is
well, it's
trolley.
like one action would result in the death of one person, and inaction would result in everyone starving to death.
Exactly, and that's a very different distinction. That's a very different scenario than actually killing one individual who, if you left them alone, would live in order to save somebody else.
Um, like, are you saying that in terms of like people consume animals?
Right. So in the case of consuming animals, you are taking the life of someone who would live if you didn't do it. As opposed to, let's say, a burning building where you choose to save, let's say, this human over this animal. But if you don't do
And
anything, they both
that's
die.
where we fundamentally disagree, where I feel like animal products are vital to human life and thriving as a human, whereas you obviously see a vegan diet as adequate.
Well, no. So the case, even if you're going to say that that killing an animal is the only way to live, that's still a situation where you are that isn't a burning building scenario. You are killing this individual in order to live, but that individual would not have died had you not. So that's not the same thing as choosing to save yourself over an animal if you both were dying, because the animal
Well,
would
just
be doomed anyway.
hypothetically, if humans needed animal products to live, would it not be justified to kill an animal and eat it?
So, no, it would not be morally justified to do it. It might be morally acceptable to save your life over the life of an animal, but it wouldn't be morally acceptable to kill the animal to save your life.
Even if hypothetically humans needed needed like if animal products were vital to human life, hypothetically.
Yeah, even in that scenario, it would not be morally acceptable to take someone else who's capable of experiencing a state of being that is of inherent value, like the ability to love, to take their life to save somebody. And remember, keep in mind that animals have the same sort of capacity as humans, that as young humans, as humans that are neuroatypical. So if you're going to say that if you're going to say that it's okay to take the life of this animal because they are not capable of having language, then you'd have to be saying the same thing about other humans as well.
It's not just that they aren't capable of having language, their brains have developed. They've been separated from us for millions of years. They've evolved differently. Their brains have evolved different structures, different patterns. It wouldn't be equivalent to say just because they can't speak that they're at the same level as a 2-year-old human child.
I think in their capacity to experience the sort of warm glow you feel when you hug someone you care about, this trait has been quite well preserved for hundreds of millions of years. And so I think in that particular aspect, that trait that has inherent value, I would not say that you could. I don't think you can make a coherent argument that there's a vast, or that there's really any.
Okay, guys.
Interesting.
Sorry to butt in. I appreciate that this is rude, but maybe get one or two final points in on the subject that you're currently discussing. I want to wrap this up. You guys are more than welcome to continue debating. Absolutely. Who wants to go first with that?
Hey, Beyond, you want to take it first, and I'll put some notes down, or do you want me to?
Well,
Yeah, I mean,
to,
you guys can
to,
continue talking by all means, but I want to stop
to
the recording. So
no, yeah, I'm almost about done soon.
fair enough.
To Chang,
Yeah,
Chang.
that was pretty enlightening to the vegan perspective, I guess. That's really what I was here for. I just wanted more background on how the morality aspect of veganism.
Yeah, and feel free to DM me if you want any more clarification. And again, of course, not everyone has exactly my views. So you might hear different perspectives from other people, including
Right.
Beyond, for that matter. We share a lot, but also we disagree on some things.
Right.
Anyway, Beyond, do you have
I
anything like you
Yeah,
wanted
go
to
ahead.
summarize a little bit? I was going to take some notes for myself, and then I would do it after.
Well, just this notion that animal products are essential. I mean, I don't think I think a great amount of people are realizing that that's not true. But I'm prepared to grant you that you might feel more endorphins if you're eating a piece of like liver or something like that. I mean, but again, if you're pumping these animal endorphins through your body and you're feeling more quote unquote alive or whatever, like this is your subjective anecdote, but
right.
I don't know why that's going to lead to like a better
I am
outcome.
not convinced that humans were meant to be herbivores. Like, if you look at every single indigenous culture around the world, they've gotten like 60% of their calories from animal foods on average.
Wait, but I think I agree. Like if you're
I'm just not
saying
convinced
biological,
that humans were meant to be herbivores.
like you mean biological herbivore?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I don't think we're biological herbivores, but I do think that we're facultative herbivores. I mean, we can. It seems like we can just eat like plants and fungi and do which then like defaults back, like it circles back to the ecological and ethical question.
Well, the ecological part is debatable, as well as the ethical part.
Like we're using
my
a landmass.
perspective on the ethical argument.
We're using a landmass the size of Africa to basically farm animals just worldwide, and there has to be a better use for that amount of land than just like burgers. It
Well,
just seems ridiculous to me.
If everyone goes to veganism, then the world's going to be filled with monocrop farm fields.
I don't espouse that kind of.
I don't espouse factory farm industrial conventionally raised meat either.
Yeah, I mean, I
buy most of my
I
meat
just
from local
concede
farms.
monocropping. Like I concede that monocropping is bad. But that's not to say that we can't meet the world's needs through. There's a plethora of permaculture, polyculture, agroecological, aquaculture. There's so many other methods we could and should and we have the knowledge now to be implementing these, but we're just not.
Yeah,
So
it's the same with the conventionally raised,
like what I said before about vegans and boycotting. I don't know if you're here or if you came in yet, but I was saying that if vegans are so capable of boycotting certain products, there are other plant products which seem to be negative for the environment as well. So
Oh
we
yeah.
should be trying to support more local or more diverse permaculture projects, and in the end, that's probably going to be beneficial for your health as well. I mean, seems like
Yeah,
the
that's
nutrient.
it's actually refreshing to hear a vegan talk about this, because most of the time when I see vegans, they just don't have any opinion on this sort of stuff.
Well, like if we're just comparing conventional versus conventional for plants or beef, I
Right.
think most people agree that just due to input metrics that the beef are going to take up a lot more, so it's going to
Yeah, I see how that works.
destroy. Yeah, it's gonna cause more destruction at a greater rate. But again, I don't like that dichotomization though that vegans like to place on it. I don't think it's that simple. I mean, it is more complicated
Oh,
than.
absolutely.
And then with grass, like I'm exploring more like of the grass-fed arguments, but I'm not entirely convinced of these. Like, so a common point that they'll raise is that a lot of this land isn't suitable to grow other crops. Like, so it's only suitable for pasture,
Right.
which again, I think that the land wants to be a forest, and just turning to pasture is limiting it from doing what it wants to do. And food forests are the most
Well, there's a lot of
productive.
natural grasslands on the surface of the earth.
Sure, I mean, like there are areas which just like the prairies, which they're not they're not suited to be a forest. But I guess I'm talking about the majority of the land. It actually does want to be a forest. I mean, it might be like a meadow, and I could see a system where you allow that to grow, but you have a few animals in there. But again, then you have to default to the ethical question. So if you're minimizing, again, I don't know how this works for the carnivore argument, because you have to eat so much meat, and like what this would mean for society if more people became carnivores is that we actually are going to need more land, which we don't even have. So it seems like, to me, it seems like a privileged sort of diet. But I mean, that might get some pushback. And
I buy most of my, just for reference, I buy most of my beef from local farms.
I mean, like ethically, I see no
And dairy as
distinction,
well.
but like ecologically, I mean, like it's going to use like that uses a lot of land anyway. I think grass-fed uses 2 to 4 times as much land as conventional, because the reason why we even went to conventional was because it uses less land. It's like better strain.